You never expect rent to go down, but Nashville's seen a rise like few other large metro areas. Just in the last year, the median rent spiked 12%, topping $2,000 a month for the first time, and incomes aren't even close to keeping up. When push comes to shove, eviction notices start coming. Tenants rush to court making their case, but they can rarely afford legal help. This hour, we'll hear from a group of local advocates trying to support desperate tenants and also get the view from landlords. That's coming up after this hour's news, so stay with us. This is Nashville.
Sharing news and stories from the voices of Middle Tennessee. That's This is Nashville. Our show is made possible by Music City Prep Clinic. This is Nashville is in service to you. So if you have an idea for the show or feedback you'd like us to hear, leave us a voice message at 615-751-2500.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Trump is unveiling an action plan on AI. Today, he's expected to sign executive orders that advance Silicon Valley's priorities by rolling back Biden-era regulations on artificial intelligence. NPR's Deepa Shivaram takes a closer look.
The White House says there are over 90 policy actions included in the plan, which centers around removing barriers to innovation and technology and rapidly building up infrastructure like AI data centers. White House AI czar David Sachs told reporters that it's important the U.S. is the dominant force on AI on the global stage.
It's a global competition now to lead in artificial intelligence, and we want the United States to win that race.
The White House also wants to make sure, quote, ideological bias isn't in the AI models used by the federal government. They want a, quote, standard of truthfulness. But officials did not go into detail on what exactly that means. Deepa Shivaram, NPR News.
Mass protests erupt in Ukraine. Activist remarks captured by the Associated Press in the streets of the capital, Kyiv, today. People angry. President Volodymyr Zelensky signed a bill that many are worried will undermine Ukraine's main anti-corruption bodies. Meanwhile, negotiators from Ukraine and Russia are holding talks today about ending their more than 3-year-old war. NPR's Charles Maine says the meeting's being held in Turkey.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky initiated the talks with an appeal to Moscow to accelerate negotiations towards a ceasefire, yet expectations remain stubbornly low. Ahead of the talks, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov warned not to expect miracles or breakthroughs and said Russia remained committed to achieving its military goals. The spokesman also made clear the Kremlin was not ready to engage Zelensky's calls for a face-to-face meeting with President Vladimir Putin aimed at securing a lasting peace. Instead, Russia is signaling it may agree to additional exchanges of prisoners and war dead, the lone accomplishment from previous negotiations and far less than the Trump administration is demanding. Charles Maines, NPR News, Moscow.
Opening federal lands to housing could provide relief in some areas, but as NPR's Laurel Walmsley reports, a new study also finds the land is not located where housing is most needed.
The U.S. government owns roughly 640 million acres of land, and the Trump administration has pushed to sell some of it and develop it for housing. The discussion has focused on land overseen by the Bureau of Land Management. The problem, notes a new study from Realtor.com, is where that land is located. The biggest acreages are in Alaska and Nevada. Other western states have big chunks too. But there's virtually no BLM land in the Northeast and in most metro areas nationwide, where housing costs are among the highest. Building homes and infrastructure on remote acreages would be expensive too. Still, if some of the land were used for millions of new homes, many Americans might find it attractive to move there.
That's Laurel Walmsley. It's NPR. A growing number of American Jews whose families fled Germany in the years before the Holocaust are now seeking German citizenship. NPR's Jason DeRose reports some say they fear political changes in the United States.
In 2021, Germany expanded who's eligible to apply for citizenship, focusing on the descendants of Jews who fled Nazi persecution. Attorney David Young's company, Becoming German, has helped about 1,500 people gain German citizenship.
There's been a pretty dramatic increase of people applying for this over the last 8 years or so.
Young says so many people are applying, the paperwork that used to take a few months for the German government to process is now taking a couple of years. Ease of travel and the notion of righting historic wrongs are among the reasons people are applying, but some say they're doing so because of growing anti-Semitism and growing authoritarianism in the U.S. Jason DeRose, NPR News.
A mysterious illness sent 8 Massachusetts children to the hospital last night. The Cambridge Fire Department chief, Thomas Cahill, is quoted by local media explaining that the patients were attending a French youth choir concert at a church near Harvard University when they started experiencing seizure-like but non-life-threatening symptoms. The fire department says its hazmat team did a sweep of the grounds at St. Paul's Parish for possible contamination. Officials say nothing dangerous turned up. U.S. stocks trading higher this hour with the Dow Jones Industrial Average up 392 points or more than 0.75%. This is NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive Insurance. Progressive is looking for individuals in a variety of career fields who want to help build a culture of inclusiveness. More information, including application, at progressive.com/careers.
Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum, where members receive unlimited gallery admission, access to museum events, and member benefits for parking and shopping. More at countrymusichалloffame.org.
Congress just voted to rescind funding for public broadcasting. That will result in a $400,000 shortfall in WPLN's budget this year. Every day, we here at This Is Nashville bring you the voices and stories of Middle Tennessee. We share the stories that matter to you. We amplify the voices of your community, and we need your support to keep doing all of that and more. Give now at WPLN.org.
I'm Blake Farmer, and this is Nashville. If you are a renter in this fair city, you do not need me to tell you that your monthly obligation has grown much faster than most paychecks, even if you count surrounding counties where rent might be more affordable, might not be. You're still talking about most people paying around $1,800 a month, and incomes are not even close to keeping up. Just in the last year, the median rent spiked about 12%. Well, our incomes, on the other hand, not rising so fast, and according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, wages here are lower than the national average. But today we're not talking about affordability. This is kind of the setup to talk about what I'd call the nuclear option in the landlord-leasee relationship, eviction. In Davidson County, more than 1,000 tenants are being evicted every month. Producer Josh Deepin spent a day at eviction court, which has become a busy place. Let's listen.
On Tuesday, July 15th, at the Metro Nashville Courthouse, Judge Sam Coleman opens the session by calling off a rather long but typical docket. Most here are landlords hoping to recoup lost rent payments.
Forest View Park homeowners versus LaShonta Hayes.
Present for the plaintiff, Your Honor.
Vote! The judge announces a default judgment when evicted tenants did not show.
Vote! It'll be a dismissal, Your Honor.
Dismissal granted.
Tenants who do show up and can't afford representation may have the option to seek help from the Eviction Right to Counsel. Attorney Liz Leiserson represents the Legal Aid Society of Middle Tennessee.
We have staff here from the Nashville Hispanic Bar Association and from Legal Aid Society where we can give tenants information about their rights and options and so on.
And many in Nashville have seen a positive outcome, like Marilyn Massey.
I'm suing a property. 2 years ago, I had a stroke and stuff, and I'm handicapped. They put me up some stairs where they didn't supposed to put me at. I gave them a doctor's statement and everything, and it was hard for me to get in touch with. 2 years later, they trying to sue me, so I'm returning a favor and call Legal Aid to help me pursue my lawsuit.
What are you hoping to get out of this?
Justice, pain and suffering and all that stuff. And I want my deposit back. They didn't want to pay me my deposit.
Many tenants have significant challenges contributing to their inability to keep up with rising rents, like Jeremy Brooks, whose personal issues have disrupted his ability to work and provide for his family.
I've had 2 family members hospitalized at the same time. Stepfather had bypass heart surgery, and my mother-in-law had a stroke. A whole bunch of things started happening all at one time. My tires for my vehicle, I do Uber. I depend on a good working vehicle to do my job. It just wasn't going right.
Recently evicted tenant Jonathan Son says he felt blindsided by his landlord when he was handed his eviction notice.
I got injured at work. I realized I was going to be late with the rent because I haven't received any compensation. So I notified them almost 2 weeks in advance that I would be late. And from that moment on, they started harassing, threatening, and nonstop nightmare from my landlords.
But John Ellis, the attorney representing Mr. Son's landlords, had a different point of view. He says Son became belligerent and they felt eviction was the only option.
We're not happy about having to evict him. We're not happy the situation occurred. But at the end of the day, my clients have a mortgage on the property and they have to pay that. And if people don't pay their rent, they can't pay their mortgage. And that may sound cold, but at the end of the day, we do what we have to do.
Mr. Ellis says for landlords, removing a tenant is typically not the first plan of action, and it comes with its own headaches.
They would rather keep the tenant and receive their money. You have to go through the problem of screening a new tenant and getting the new things all together. If they're a good tenant, just work something out with them.
Reporting in Nashville, Josh Deepin, WPLN News.
And we're going to be talking about what working something out looks like on this episode of This Is Nashville. A little more setup before we hop into this discussion. Renters here do have fewer rights than those in other states, and Tennessee state law gives very little leeway for late payments and extensions. And, of course, they can hardly afford legal representation if they can't make their rent. But there are options, which is what the show's about. We've got legal experts and community advocates who've joined forces to form the Eviction Right to Counsel, a program that offers free legal services and education to those living in Davidson County facing eviction. Happy to have in front of me the Legal Aid Society attorney Liz Leiserson and attorney with the Nashville Hispanic Bar Association, Ann Boatner. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you.
And
Thanks for having us.
On the line via Zoom, we have attorney John Ellis, who you heard in that story, but also joining us for this hour. John Ellis, thanks for joining us, an attorney who represents many landlords.
Well, I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So, Liz, let me start with you. When a tenant gets an eviction notice, how soon do they need to do where we just were, appear in court?
Yeah. So one thing I always like to tell folks, an eviction notice under Tennessee law, if your landlord has started a lawsuit, it's called a detainer warrant. That's a scary phrase. It sounds like arrestee arrest paper. But from when you get your detainer warrant, that notice of an eviction lawsuit, until you have court, under Tennessee law, you have to have at least 6 days. It's not a ton of time, but it is a little bit. And it gives you a little bit of time to prepare, to start figuring out what you're going to do, to reach out to a program like Eviction Right to Counsel, and to figure out how you're going to make it to court.
So what is that notice? You said it has a scary word like a detainer on it, but is that the official notice? How are they supposed to be notified?
Yeah, so a detainer warrant, that's that scary paper. I always say it should be called a notice of an eviction lawsuit. Okay. That's what it is. But it says across the top, detainer warrant, and people always call and say, I'm not being arrested, am I? And no, you're not. That's the notice that a lawsuit has been filed against you. It's like the complaint, basically, where your landlord is alleging you violated your lease, maybe you're behind on rent, and they'd like to evict you, and here's your court date. That's that paper. Whether you got notice before that is actually going to depend on exactly what happened and what it says in your lease. You were mentioning before that Tennessee laws are maybe, in some cases, a little less protective than those in other states. One thing that a lot of tenants don't know is many tenants in Nashville have actually waived their right to notice if you're behind on rent. So one thing I always advise folks, check your lease and see if it says that you waived notice for non-payment. If you waived notice for non-payment, that means your landlord can go straight to court, and it's possible that the first you'll hear of it is when you get that paper that you have a court date.
You're saying that when you signed a lease that you kind of skimmed, it might have been in there that you waived that right. Wow.
That's right.
Ann Boatner, it seems like when a tenant has few legal protections when they're in this moment, and that they kind of need to work it out with their landlord primarily. What kind of deals get made to avoid further legal action?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of different structures of deals that we can come up with in eviction court. The most common one is just a payment plan or a little bit more time for a paycheck to come through or rental assistance, an application to process. What we really want is a solution that makes both the tenant and the landlord happy at the end of the day. Now, if the landlord has to spend a lot of money to go through court to get a judgment, that's just a piece of paper. What we can do is we can get people actual payment plans, actual checks, real measurable assistance instead of just a judgment.
John Ellis, can you hop in here and offer the landlord perspective? What are you looking for when it comes to noticing someone of an eviction?
Well, I mean, we usually, I typically would give the tenant 10 days from the time that we serve them to the time that we set the court date. We'll preset the court dates. And if the tenant, it has to be realistic. If a tenant is just really underwater, if they're 2 or 3 months behind and they've made promises and there's nothing we can do, that's probably something that's going to be a little hard for us to overcome. If somebody is, 1 month or they've been paying partial rental payments, then yeah, I mean, frequently we try to work something out where we'll go, okay, you can pay 1.5 months rent for the next, 3 months, and that'll catch up your 1.5 months delinquency. And most of my clients would rather have the income as opposed to having to go in and, there's invariably there's going to be things that have to be done to the property, fix damage. A lot of times we're painting where maybe we have to replace carpet. There may be holes in the wall. And sometimes they're not big holes. They're just pinholes from where somebody's, put a thumbtack in the wall to hold up a poster. Not a big deal, but it's still things that have to be repaired because the new tenant wants a pristine apartment.
Right.
Or a house.
So you're saying there's essentially going to be cost in flipping that apartment. There's going to be some probably vacant time, and it serves the landlord's interest probably to keep that tenant in there. But what is it that you find typically is the the mood from the tenant? I mean, are they in a discussion mode? Do they want to talk about this, or do you more often find that they, are sort of hiding from you?
Well, no, I find that if tenants have given up, then I wouldn't call it hiding. They just, they kind of ignore the situation and are resigned to the fact that they're going to have to move.
Yeah.
But overall, I think it's disruptive for the tenant as well. Maybe their kids are in school. They don't want to have to find another apartment in the same school district and get that worked out. It's a win-win situation when we can work something out. I mean, that's just, and really that's a primary goal. It's a rare occasion when somebody is just so, such a disagreeable tenant that the landlord has no desire whatsoever to try to keep them on. So we'll try.
Yeah.
All of my clients, most of my clients would rather try to work something out, and at least 80% of the time.
If you're just joining us, I'm Blake Farmer. This is Nashville. We're talking about rent, evictions, and improving the landlord-tenant dynamic when money gets tight. And if you're listening and want to go deeper with us, we're also streaming on YouTube, which we've started doing the last couple of weeks. It's at the Nashville Public Radio YouTube channel. You can stream it at youtube.com/@WPLN. I recommend also subscribing. Great part of watching is you can also leave comments as we go here. But diving back into it, so it does seem that there's two sides to probably every story that is resulting in some sort of eviction notice. So, Ann, how do you make sure that tenants are being fully transparent with what's going on, even when they're working with you all for help?
Well, I think that we ask our clients to be transparent and honest with us because you cannot get good and effective legal counsel if you are not fully transparent with your attorney.
Yeah.
So that's something that we tend to talk about on the front end. And if I don't think that what my client is telling me makes sense, we'll ask questions and make sure that we do understand it.
Yeah, and with this program, Eviction Right to Counsel, how does someone come to you? Because I could imagine they don't really know where to look for help. How do you become their attorney?
Absolutely. Well, there are a few ways to reach us. The most common way really is we have a table outside the courtroom 5 days a week that's staffed with usually a couple of employees from one or both of our programs. And it's just full of educational information, contact information for our individual programs and lots of other really, really helpful resources.
So, Liz, we're talking about 1,000 eviction notices per month or so in Nashville, Davidson County. Has that increased? I mean, I guess that's what I was assuming, but it was a little hard to figure out if that's up or down or just where we've always been.
Yeah, it's increasing and has been increasing steadily since the pandemic. So every year we have more total evictions filed than we did the year before.
Yeah.
The eviction crisis is sort of part and parcel of the affordable housing crisis in Nashville. You were talking earlier about how when tenants are coming and trying to work something out, landlords often want to try and work something out. But one thing I like to emphasize is people aren't being evicted for fun. There's a reason, almost always, why somebody's, for example, if it's someone's behind on rent, there's usually a reason. There's usually something that happened. Evictions don't happen in a silo. And one of the things that our program can do is sometimes we can figure out what's going on. So if, for example, if you've missed rent, is the reason you missed rent because you lost your job because you have an abusive partner who was stalking you at work and then you had to stop working and then you were trying to figure out childcare and then the bottom fell out?
It sounds like probably based on a true story.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah.
An unfortunately common one that I see in my line of work pretty regularly is somebody who has a life-threatening illness. They have to stop working. They go through all of their savings, and it's been a couple of months, and maybe they're still in chemo or radiation. They still can't work. It takes months maybe for disability payments to be approved. And this is where so many evictions happen, is where the rubber meets the road. If something's fallen apart in your life and you really need support and you need someone on your side, and it's hard when you go into that courthouse and you heard in that clip, so things are going real fast. The judge is talking real fast,
Right.
and you maybe
Default. Is that Sam Coleman from the bench? Is that
That
it?
is,
Okay.
yes.
I remember. Go
The,
ahead.
the word is just fault.
Oh, just fault, not default. Fault.
In Judge Coleman's lingo, it's fault.
Okay.
The
Just
full
fault.
term is default judgment, but he likes to say fault.
Well, John Ellis on the line here. Can you talk to me? You know, obviously, I don't even sense that we are at odds here. That your interest is the same as the Eviction Right to Counsel folks. Have you seen with their presence the last couple of years maybe more paths to a resolution coming forward?
Well, I mean, the landlord and the tenant, the landlord especially has to want to make that effort to resolve that.
And when you say the landlord, you're sort of like not you, your client.
Correct.
Right.
I mean, and for me, and I tell people all the time, if it's a tenant that I'm having to put out, I take no joy in making anyone move out of their house.
Yeah.
That's not what it is. And I really do try to work things out. We've had things where, I had a brother and sister that were renting an apartment, and she got pregnant and had complications with her pregnancy and couldn't work. We let them get substantially delinquent because that would have been really insult to injury. Ultimately, it worked out very well. The guy was able to get more hours at work. He got current, and I still don't know if the baby's here. I didn't get an invitation to the shower or anything, but those are situations that many, not all, but many landlords are sensitive to. I have known landlords that just don't care. And I don't represent those people as a general rule because that's just not the way I think the process should behave. People have problems, and I try to provide some amount of empathy to the tenant because, things do happen in life. Not everything is expected. But if the tenant gets belligerent, if like someone said, well, if you evict me, I'm gonna burn your house down. Or if they say, I'm from California, it's going to take 6 months to move me out. Well, that's fighting talk, and that's not helpful to the situation. So when somebody comes to my office and said, the tenant said it's going to take, 3-4 months before we can put him out, then at that point, they've they've kind of surrendered the willingness to negotiate.
Well, we're gonna talk more about what that negotiation looks like and what mediation can be. That's attorney John Ellis, who represents landlords. In front of me here, Liz Leiserson with the Legal Aid Society and Boatner with the Nashville Hispanic Bar Association, both representing the Eviction Right to Counsel program, which helps advocate for tenants facing eviction. And we'll keep these three attorneys in here for another round of questioning, but we need to take a short break. When we return, we'll get into what happens when a tenant actually refuses to leave and where they can go when there is nowhere else to go. We'll also hear how the Eviction Rights to Counsel offers practical help. So stay with us. This is Nashville.
Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Goodwill Industries of Middle Tennessee, providing free training, upskilling, and support to help thousands of Middle Tennesseans find meaningful jobs, thanks to the generosity of donors and shoppers. Learn more at giveittogoodwill.org/donate. And the Howell Allen Clinic, specializing in minimally invasive robotic spine surgery and laser brain tumor surgery. For 40 years, the neurosurgeons of the Howell Allen Clinic have been leaders in brain and spine surgery. And Pastaria, a celebration of Italy in Nashville, in the One City development, serving dinner daily. Additional menu information about the 4 to 6 p.m. offerings and Meatball Mondays online at eatpastaria.com.
Hi, I'm Tony Gonzalez, news director at WPLN. Congress has approved a $1.1 billion clawback from public broadcasting. That amounts to a $400,000 shortfall for WPLN this year. Your gift now of any amount helps bridge that gap. This is radio for everyone. You, your neighbors, the kids in the back seat of the car next to you. With local reporters covering stories you care about. Help keep your public radio station strong and independent. Give at WPLN.org.
And I'm going to add on to that, Tony, before we get back to the show about evictions. I wanted to provide an update on WPLN's emergency fund drive going on now, wrapping up this afternoon. You have been incredibly generous over the last 2 days, helping raise more than $334,000 so far. Incredible. I don't know if it's a record, but I've been around here a long time. Not sure we've ever raised that much money in 2.5 days. Still have $66,000 to go, though. We asked, you answered. This year's budget hole left by Congress clawing back funds from public media is $400,000. Our plan is to finish up this emergency fund drive today, so please keep the phones moving to support Public Radio Middle Tennessee at 615-760-2010. If you've never given, now is a great time to start. The need has never been more real. And if you're already giving monthly, step up your contribution, or at least consider it. If everyone increased their gift by just a few dollars, the problem is solved, at least in the near term. And there is much more uncertainty ahead, but the way you have come through this week gives us great confidence that the future of public radio is bright. You can give at WPLN.org. Now back to the show. I'm Blake Farmer, and this is Nashville. So 1,000 Nashvillians are handed an eviction notice each month, or maybe it's just posted on their door, to say nothing of tenants in neighboring counties. This is kind of where the rubber meets the road as rent becomes out of reach, which it has for many families. This hour, we're getting a better understanding of the process and what can be done to avoid the mess of an eviction. Here to speak with us on what tenants and landlords can do to help mitigate the issue are two attorneys from the newly formed Eviction Right to Counsel Coalition, Ann Boatner with the Nashville Hispanic Bar, and Liz Leiserson with the Legal Aid Society. We also have attorney John Ellis on the line, bringing the important perspective from landlords. Thanks for hanging with us. John Ellis, can you start by kind of setting the scene? What usually happens in your experience when someone is being evicted?
Well, I mean, fortunately, most of the time when the sheriff puts that notice on their door.
And it is the sheriff's deputy?
Well, yeah. You have to have the sheriff. I want a good jury trial for somebody that didn't use a sheriff and evicted my client. Who was 19 years old. And anyway, but the process for somebody to be put out, we would file our writ of possession, and that goes to the sheriff. the sheriff will not come to the door. They won't knock on the door unless you've got 4 people. They'll usually bring 1 man and 1 woman, a sheriff, a male and a female. And if we don't have 4 people, they won't knock on the door.
What's the 4 people about?
Well, because that's just their number in order to make it expeditious and get people, get everything moved out. Because if the people haven't done anything to prepare themselves for having to move out, then it's up to the crew, right? That's going to have to go in there, pick everything up, and put it out in the front yard.
You're saying on this approach to the door, this is about to be an instant move out.
Absolutely, yeah.
Wow. Okay.
If somebody comes, if they come to the door, and the sheriff will post a notice that'll say, we're going to be here in 3 days with a crew. If you're not out in 3 days, you're going to be.
Mm-hmm.
If the tenant has changed the locks, the property manager has to bring a locksmith. So those are just kind of the steps. I've only had a few that have gone that far, to be honest. I've been doing this 27 years. And to actually have to put people out in the street has only been a very few times. I can probably count them on one hand. Because most people realize that it's in their best interest to move out in an organized way.
Yeah. Ann Boatner, would you concur with that typically it does not come to being kicked to the curb?
Well, that's our hope for every renter in Davidson County, that they don't have to experience the disruptive displacement of being set out from your home.
Right.
And yeah, I do think that he's correct in that it's not something that we see in every case, but we do certainly see it happen where, for whatever reason, oftentimes if a tenant misses their court date and gets a default judgment, and then that judgment takes 10 days to become final, and then the landlord gets that writ of possession that he was talking about, they may not know that it's coming. There may have been a notice to the door, but...
So let me walk through this so I understand. You're saying someone may have posted on the door, and is that somebody from the sheriff's office who posts on the door?
Well, if we're talking about the court paperwork, it could be a sheriff or it could be a private process server.
Got it.
What the set out process, the writ of possession, that will be a sheriff.
So, but the warning, like this is coming, you've got a court date. That could be there. Let's say they sort of put their head in the sand because I don't know what to do about this. They don't show up in court and Judge Sam Coleman says fault. They don't hear about that. It takes 10 days, and all of a sudden they feel like they don't know anything about this, but the 4 folks are showing up at the door to move them out.
That's right. Or they may get that letter posted to the door that says sheriff's coming in 72 hours.
I see.
And that's the first time they're knowing about it.
And I'll say, this is unfortunately, I'm really glad to hear that it hasn't been your experience so much to see this in 27 years. I've been doing it for 3, and we get a call about a set out. We get calls about set outs multiple times a month.
So the term of art is set out there. Well, and it may be John Ellis's choosing of his who he works with. Yeah, certainly. Well, so Liz, what do you see? You mentioned that some of those clients might just where do they go when they're in that moment of desperation? If that indeed is happening, what are their options?
They're not good.
Yeah.
And one of the goals of the Eviction Right to Counsel program is to try and make sure, like Ann said, that we don't end up there. Because the set out process, if you get there, is traumatic.
Mm-hmm.
It's awful. And my heart goes out to folks because I get calls regularly from folks who maybe they were out of town when the notice got posted on their door. They get back, somebody's taken it. You don't necessarily get a copy of the court judgment mailed to you in time. Remember, we've got this 10-day window we're working with. There's 1,000 evictions filed a month. You're supposed to get a copy of that judgment eventually, but there truly are folks who know nothing until the common sheriff's notice you get in Davidson County is 24 hours. And if you are truly in that situation, just put yourself there. You've got 24 hours, and tomorrow, everything you own is going to be on the street. And I get calls from folks in tears who are saying, the sheriff's here right now. They're knocking on my door. I don't know what happened, and I'm about to lose everything I own. And the landlord's job is to put it somewhere outside. What that commonly means, unfortunately, is right next to the dumpsters. And I've heard stories about right into the dumpsters, although they're definitely not supposed to do that. And everything gets broken, everything gets lost, it gets stolen and rained on. And then it's trying to rebuild your life from that moment is incredibly hard. It's expensive. It's going to tear your family apart. It's going to set you back months or years.
Yeah. We got a comment on our YouTube stream. A guy named Thomas says, I was evicted, left with all the same problems and none of my tools. I was not guilty. He says, I got zero help, lost everything, plus 2 brothers, and no, I don't trust the courts. Tell me about the trust factor on the courts, that, like, you've got folks who maybe have not had amazing interactions with the legal system, and they get the sort of scary detainer warrant documentation on their door. How often do you see that they're just fearful of what might happen in a courtroom?
Lots of folks are. And this is actually one of the places where Ann and I in our program, the Eviction Right to Counsel program, comes in. Because you heard about there are plenty of landlords who are willing to negotiate, and you might well be able to work something through. But that's scary. Yeah. It's hard. That detainer warrant paper, when you get it, it is a dense block of text, and it talks about everything under the sun, and it says something vague. You owe all rent and attorney's fees. You can maybe keep your family Bible, and there's like an address and a time. And your heart stops when you get that piece of paper.
So you're almost like, if I show up, I may be worse off than if I just sort of duck this and hope that they're, wow.
So one of the things that helps a lot, and where our program comes in, is having someone who's on your side.
Yeah.
Having a lawyer with you in that moment is huge, because then when you're going into that negotiation that the person you're negotiating with, you have somebody who's fully on your side. Now, if you put the landlord's attorney, and Mr. Ellis can maybe speak to this some, landlord's attorneys, a lot of them, they're going to try their very best to make sure they can work out a deal. But in the end, their duty is to your landlord, to their client. That has to be. That's lawyer rules. And so when you're sitting there and you're negotiating and you're maybe sort of hoping that they're neutral, they can't be. So having somebody on your side who can help you through the court process, help you understand what's going on, help you navigate these tricky waters, and they can be really tricky. I've talked to folks who can't even figure out when their court date is. Yeah. Having a lawyer on your side can make a big difference in navigating that process.
Well, for the folks who don't show up at court and see your table, Ann, that is sitting outside the courtroom, how would they discover the service that other than listening here? Like, how could people become aware of it?
Of course, you can contact any of our programs individually. You can email us, or our contact line is nashvillehispanicbar.org/contact. You can submit that.
Because there's so many organizations, and there are more coming on in the final segment of the show here, but like many organizations that you wouldn't think have a role in this, who would usher you here. Okay.
Absolutely. And if you get to one of the 5 coalition partners, usually it'll make its way to the right one.
Got it. So it's whether it's Legal Aid Society or it's the Hispanic. Okay. Yep. I do wonder, John Ellis on the line, this issue of the process seeming so scary, which I imagine is somewhat intentional, because you need people to understand how serious the matter is. Is it self-defeating in some ways? Do you think there could be a way that it makes it a little less adversarial and comes out better for both sides?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's always a way to make it less adversarial, but the bottom line is, do they, for instance, okay, I had an eviction in Gallatin, right? And when my process server, I use a private process server all the time.
This is the person who might go post something on the door for the tenant?
They'll go post something on the door.
Okay.
And when he says, well, there's a new car in the driveway with temporary tags on it.
Mm.
And that's the kind of thing where you go, and I had been to court with this person, and we had tried to work something out. She was already behind. And it was not the first time that she'd gotten behind and gotten current. And so, and then when he says, well, there's a new car in the driveway. And I was just like, come on now.
Mm-hmm.
What are you spending your money on?
Yeah.
And one of the things that, we're talking about posting on the door. I think a lot of times people may not think that they're really being served when it's posted on the door.
They think served means it has to be handed to me. They
think that. Now, there's a method. If the process server makes 3 attempts and nobody answers the door, on the 3rd attempt, they can strike out the prayer for money relief and seek possession only, which is just possession, no money, and tape that to the door. And that's considered good service. Now, some people may not think that they've been served because the notice is only taped to the door. And that may just be that they don't understand the process, but that is good service.
I see.
They make 3 attempts within a 10-day period. And if there's no answer on the 3rd try, they strike out the prayer for money and they just tape it to the door.
And you have to follow that up by service by U.S.
mail. You have to send certified mail. You have to send a copy of it by certified mail. The same with abandoned property, where the landlord would have to take the property into their possession and hold it for 30 days.
I see. So, but what you're saying is if you actually cannot reach the person, they might not owe you back rent, but they will get set out, as we've learned the term.
Right.
Yeah. If you're just joining us, I'm Blake Farmer. This is Nashville. We're talking rent, evictions, improving landlord-tenant dynamics when money gets tight. And if you'd rather watch than just listen, we're streaming on YouTube at WPLN is the channel. And you feel free to leave a comment there like Thomas did, and we'll try to get it here into this conversation. Ann and Liz both, as John Ellis talks about, it's probably impossible for a landlord not to try to judge the financials of their tenant. They, like he was talking about, we see a new car with temporary tags. You must have bought a car. You couldn't pay your rent. It seems impossible to avoid that kind of judgment. Is that fair to the tenant?
I think for every tenant you have who just bought a new car, you have 5 who were sick, who lost their job, who suffered a loss in their family, who had genuine, legitimate reasons to have a substantial loss of income that could explain why they were unable to pay their rent.
Yeah.
And so, I think that there are certainly examples of tenants acting in bad faith, but so too there are examples of landlords acting in bad faith. And I think that if we assume the best in our landlords and our tenants, that's the best and most productive way to make these agreements happen that make our landlords and tenants happy.
Liz,
rent is fantastically expensive.
Yeah.
Rents are fantastically high here in Nashville and even the surrounding areas. And I don't know what we do about that. House costs are high. That makes mortgage payments high. Taxes have gone up. Rents are just increasing. And when I see some of these rents on some of these properties, and I go, that's as much as my house payment.
Right.
And I just think, how can anybody save money to buy a house if they're paying rent that's as much as a house payment already?
Well, that's for another show, another day. And but I appreciate your sympathy there. Liz, can you add on to that this sort of assuming best intentions from both sides? Because my guess is it's the same for the tenant, that they assume some maybe negative intent maybe from the landlord.
I do. And you're going to hear a little bit about mediation in a minute. And this is a great way for folks to work through problems directly, landlords and tenants together. And it's one of the solutions that's in our Eviction Right to Counsel coalition. One of the things that I think helps put a number on it. So Eviction Right to Counsel, we've been operating for 3 years now. We had an outside report 2 years in where we found for the tenants that Legal Aid and Hispanic Bar are able to represent in court, we have about a 95% success rate on working something out that works for the tenant. And I'm sure John Ellis could say, I think for the most part, the landlords would say that the things that we're able to do also work for the landlord. Yeah. There are ways through this, but it's really important for us to recognize, number one, the power dynamic that's going on here. There are studies prior to Eviction Right to Counsel in Davidson County. We had more than 99% of landlords are represented by attorneys in court. Often that's because they have to be. If you're a corporation, you have to have a lawyer. And it was at that point less than 1% of tenants are represented. Wow. There's a power dynamic.
0.37% of tenants.
And now at least a few more.
And now more. And that power dynamic is It's a problem when you're trying to reach a mutually agreeable resolution and one person's coming in with a lot more power and weight, and you don't have a sort of neutral third party. A lot of these are agreements sort of shaken on in the hallway, and people will call afterwards. So what I like to point out, Eviction Right to Counsel program, we are part of the mayor's unified housing strategy. We are one of the potential solutions that a city can move toward to help with affordable housing. And like John's mentioned, we're not going to bring the rents down through this program, but for a lot of folks, the housing that's affordable is the housing they're already in. So if we can help folks stay in the place where they are, that can take some of the pressure off, because we talked about the options. Once you're gone, it's a lot harder to rebuild. It's a lot more expensive to help someone who's already on the street. And I'll talk about that in terms of money, but think about it for the human connection.
Yeah. Well, we need to take a quick break. John Ellis, Ann Boatner, and Liz Leiserson, thank you so much for helping us understand this complicated issue. We're going to take a break, let them go. When we come back, we'll be joined by more advocates from Eviction Right to Counsel to hear about how tenants can receive support with financing, mediation, and discrimination prevention. So stay with us. This is Nashville.
Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee, working to help donors make more possible through the power of community giving. More at cfmt.org. And UT Swarps, for 50 years evolving alongside Tennesseans' needs, providing research, technology, and field-based programs that respond to real-world challenges. Details at sworps.org. WPLN's vehicle donation program is supported in part by Zander Insurance.
Hi, I'm Blake Farmer, host of This Is Nashville. Congress just voted to rescind funding for public broadcasting. That will result in a $400,000 shortfall in WPLN's budget this year. Every day, we bring you local reporting from local voices. We cover stories that matter to you. We amplify the voices of your community. And we need your support to keep doing all of that and more. Give now at WPLN.org.
I'm Blake Farmer, and this is Nashville. Well, we flipped the studio in 90 seconds and have a whole new cast to help us understand how to navigate evictions. Roughly 1,000 tenants a month in Davidson County get a notice to vacate their property. It's the fallout from rising rent that is going up every year, sometimes by far more than what anyone's paycheck is going up. So we're wading into these complicated moments. Everyone here is part of this new coalition we've been talking about, the Eviction Right to Counsel. We have Remziya Suleyman from the American Muslim Advisory Council, Shannon Wagner with the Nashville Conflict Resolution Center, and Lisa Wooley with Rooftop Nashville. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so Shannon, what kind of situations or stories kind of stick with you over the years about the human side of eviction disputes?
Yeah, so one of our role in the coalition is that we are also in General Sessions Court working. Ann mentioned the table earlier. We're right there mediating in court, and we work with pro se clients. That's our role in the coalition.
Pro se meaning?
Meaning they are unrepresented by attorneys. So we do have dreams of continuing and eventually taking mediation as a mediation first eviction model across the city. That's big dreams. But for now, we've been in General Sessions Court for 25 years. And in terms of a story, we see a lot of what Ann and Liz were talking about, folks who are just on the cusp of very terrible things happening. And one of the stories that sticks out to me is an elderly gentleman who was in East Nashville, a new landlord, brand new to being a landlord, had purchased the property. The gentleman could not read or write and didn't know that he was being evicted. Time and time again, shows up in court. We're working with a small landlord, and we were eventually, one of the things about mediation is that it's confidential, it's private. We can take everyone in a room outside of the court system. And we were able to work out something that gave that man just a little bit longer to stay and move out, and also work out a rent plan. But the biggest thing was he was on a list for affordable housing with the city. And if he had had an eviction on his record, he would have lost that spot. And because he was mediating, he was able to avoid that eviction on his record, live with his sister for a period of time who was there helping him that day, and then move out in a timely manner. Landlord is happy ultimately, tenant is happy, and there is no eviction on the record that could permanently traumatize or displace them long term.
I see. So he still had to move out. Point is, just by sidestepping this legal thing that was going to happen one way or the other, if mediation hadn't occurred, then you help him get into housing later.
Right.
Well, Remziya, the American Muslim Advisory Council, probably not what I would think the go-to place to say, I'm about to be evicted. What should I do? So how did you all get involved?
Yeah, well, our role came into this when we realized through our partners that there was a segment in our community of Nashvillians who were facing high eviction rates, language barriers, and were afraid or unknowing of where to go for support. And so we were getting calls of support and then kind of stepped in with Eviction Right to Counsel through our partners who brought us in and saw that there was a segment of the community not being served, and we had a role to play. And specifically what we discovered is the need for language access. And, we talked a lot about legal jargon and the complexity of leases. Imagine being a new Nashvillian who just came over from Afghanistan. You were interpreting with the U.S. Army. You got the blessing of coming here into a new home, a new beginning. The American dream is real for you. And then you're in a lease, your wife is pregnant, you're on a probationary period at work, and you have to choose between missing work and being fired or going to the hospital while your wife is having an emergency delivery. And so cases like that show the impact of why we step in, being able to tell the individual, all right, this is the lease you signed. This is what you agreed to. You're missing out. You don't have the job. You can't make the payment. You're going to be evicted. But us stepping in and providing the cultural support, the language support to ensure that new Nashvillians are understanding not only their rights, but their obligations. People are here who want to do the right thing and are doing the right thing, but sometimes just need a little help, and that's our role in this.
Well, and I do wonder how federal cuts to the refugee program impacted the communities you serve.
Yeah, it's big cuts. Community members, specifically those new Nashvillians, our new neighbors who are here, who have fled persecution and war, who were traditionally would have had a few months of support, no longer have that support, and are coming into a new language and realizing how difficult the process is and are on their own. In a lot of the cases that we get, we realize that eviction is just the tip of the iceberg. A lot of these individuals are facing food insecurity, or they're needing help to get their kids enrolled in school, or they're needing job placement. And so for us, it's just we're looking at each case through a holistic lens and knowing that there's so much need, and cuts haven't made it easier, and it's putting a strain on a lot of our organizations, but we are committed to making sure that no one is being unhoused in our city.
Lisa Wooley with Rooftop Nashville, can you explain how Rooftop? We've heard about mediation and the promise of that. My understanding is that Rooftop might be more like rent assistance. How do you determine that that's the right tool for someone, that like we actually need to just tide them over?
Good question. Yes, we're the rent relief partner in the Eviction Right to Counsel. And rent relief is one tool. It's just one of the tools.
Is that what people expect, that they come to you and you're going to help them make rent?
Sure. Yeah. And when we had the pandemic ERA money, then we could do a lot more. That money has left the community. And so it's tight right now. And what we do is we really concentrate on the resolution. So when someone has the ability to pick up their rent payments after assistance, that's when a one-time payment is really effective, because it stabilizes the household for the term of the lease. And that's where we come into play. We can also sometimes help with deposits, depending on the situation, moving someone into a more affordable unit. There's a lot of stuff we have planned with this coalition because we're in an affordable housing crisis. And so we have to look at how can we mitigate these situations before they get to court. And sometimes a one-time payment is the answer.
Mm-hmm. When is a one-time payment not the answer?
When it's an ongoing situation.
In other words, you're not making enough money to make rent the next month either. Like it's
correct.
Yeah,
correct. Or maybe your situation when the bottom falls out.
Yeah,
and there isn't an end in sight. A one-time payment just kicks the can down the road.
Yeah.
And so we need to work with our partners on how do we move that family into a different situation.
Yeah.
And it's not always as easy as the payment. We would love for it to be, but it isn't.
Shannon, our time is running short. You mentioned this dream of moving forward to a mediation first model. What would that look like if you were able to make it a reality?
It would look like the attorney that you were talking to at the first part of the show coming to NCRC or to
the landlord attorney, John Ellis.
Mm-hmm,
okay.
Exactly. Coming to us and saying, hey, I have a case I'd like to mediate with our tenants. And instead of going through the court process, instead of filing that detainer warrant, we could work with private individuals, even with public housing, with nonprofits, with small businesses to offer mediation first prior to that eviction filing so that hopefully we could reach an agreement. It would help the landlords. It would help the tenants. It could prevent as much disruption as possible. And one of the things that's important about mediation is that we are neutral. And so a mediator is trained to be a neutral party, to walk into the situation and balance that table, as Ann and Liz talked a little bit about, but also make sure that both parties are happy at the end of the day and that they can collaboratively reach a compassionate agreement.
Yeah. Remziya, we may have to end with this, but what progress have you noticed since the inception of the Eviction Rights to Counsel program? Or do you have hope? Are things getting better?
I think more education is out there. I think folks are understanding there's resources and support out there for them and the ability to access documentation and resources and languages that they need and the support that they need. I do see great progress because the number, we see an increase in cases. The eviction rates might have increased, but at the end of the day, we're helping more people. And we're preventing more people from being evicted and preventing homelessness. And we might not be able to address the housing crisis, as others folks have said, but I think we are really having intentional conversations amongst ourselves and amongst the city and partners on how do we get Nashville to where it needs to be.
And you at least have folks who are in a desperate situation who have someone there in the courtroom next to them representing them in a scary time. Remziya Suleyman with American Muslim Advisory Council, Shannon Wagner with the Nashville Conflict Resolution Center, and Lisa Wooley with Rooftop Nashville. Thank you all for joining us on This is Nashville.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in this hour. This is Nashville is a production of Nashville Public Radio. Today's episode was produced by Josh Deepen. It was directed by Tasha A.F. Limley. Our board operator, Liv Lombardi. The masterminds behind that theme music, Larange and Namir Blade. Listen back at thisisnashville.org or wherever you get good podcasts. An easy way is to ask your smart speaker to play the latest episode of This is Nashville. Try it. You can also watch the show, subscribe at Nashville Public Radio's YouTube page. It's youtube.com/@WPLN. Conversation doesn't have to end. You can comment, tell us what you want to hear on the show. You can call us with that, 615-751-2500, or find us on the socials at This is Nashville. This is Nashville. I'm Blake Farmer. Go in peace.
Funding for This is Nashville comes from you, our listeners. And Amazon, proud sponsor of WPLN's daily show, This is Nashville, engaging our differences so we can discover our unity. More on Amazon's community work at aboutamazon.com. And E3 Innovate, working to mitigate the effects of heat and humidity on homes while improving comfort, durability, and air quality during summer extremes. Summer energy audits and services at e3innovate.com.
This is 90.3 WPLN,
Nashville Public Radio,
and 91.7 WHRS Cookeville.
Nashville's home for Morning Edition and NPR News.
Hi, I'm Blake Farmer, host of This Is Nashville. Congress just voted to claw back funding for public broadcasting, which will create a $400,000 shortfall for WPLN. Help bridge the gap by giving at WPLN.org.
Funding for Here and Now comes from MathWorks, creator of MATLAB and Simulink software, accelerating the pace of engineering.